Hey guys, I'm Dan from Shasta Bubba Adventures, and it's spring. That means time to begin dreaming and planning great adventures, and time for show and tell of all the new gear. And I've got some great stuff I'm really excited to share with you. I can't wait to get out in the backcountry and test this gear in the real world, but for now, here's my new pile. I'll be sure and put links to all this gear in the description below if you want to learn more about it. I have to begin with a confession. I liked the Durston Gear X-Mid 2 so much that it led me to two more purchases. First, I sold my version 1 and invested that money in upgrading to the second version of the two-person X-Mid. There's lots of little upgrades that I talked about in my review of the X-Mid 2, which I'll put a link to up here if you missed that. But the main upgraded, believe it or not, that I wanted is the magnetic door holders. I think those will be just convenient as hell in the middle of the night. And since I believe I'm going to be using this shelter a lot in the future, I decided it was worth the money to upgrade. Now the second Durston Gear purchase I made is even more exciting though. I decided to splurge on the one-person X-Mid. Now, if you have watched some of my trip videos, this raises some questions. First, if you're splurging on new gear, why not go big and get the Pro version, right? Well, to be honest, I don't care for the hybrid tents like the Pro, which has a single wall on top and double walls on the sides. I don't like having to deal with the condensation issues that style of tent presents, especially in a relatively small space like a one-person tent. Now, granted, 16 ounces for a complete shelter system is pretty sweet. And if Dan ever decides to send me one to try out, I'll probably be jumping for joy. But the Silv Poly version is just 12 ounces heavier and a whopping $360 cheaper for a double wall shelter that is more durable and so will likely last longer. All of which I think makes the regular X-Mid 1 the better choice and worth the weight penalty. Incidentally, my hiking buddy Chris did actually splurge on both the one and the two-person Pro versions, so I do plan to do some fun head-to-head comparisons later this year, so watch for those. The second question this purchase brings up is, why get a one-person shelter when I already have the Locust Gear Khufu to use on solo trips, which is both bigger and lighter? Well, as much as I love my Khufu, the one thing I'm not crazy about is that my head and feet rub against the walls of the inner mesh tent. So I wanted to see if the X-Mid 1 wouldn't be a little more comfortable with greater length, and maybe that will be a valuable trade-off for losing the space in the width. Also, the Silv Poly X-Mid 1 is 28 ounces, which is only 4 ounces heavier than my DCF Khufu, since the inner on that shelter is actually Sil Nylon. As an aside, I'm curious to take a little poll here. It seems to me that I can no longer get a perfect pitch with my Khufu, and I'm beginning to believe that DCF does stretch somewhat over time. There's just a little sag along the bottom edge of the tarp, and if I take one corner and move it a little to the right or left, one side or the other stays loose. There's just no sweet spot possible where both edges are taut. And I believe this might be due to the DCF flapping in high winds over several years. So I wanted to ask if you would let me know in the comment section below whether you think that DCF does stretch out over time or not. I'd love to hear from you, and if this is the consensus, it's a powerful argument not to spend the extra money on high-end shelters, unless you're okay with the trade-off of weight savings versus durability, which you might be if you're using it for a long trail hike. Next on the list of new gear, I'm embarrassed to say, is the Sawyer Squeeze water filter. This is embarrassing because I've long been a proponent of the SteriPen for water treatment, and I still do think that will remain my preference, but the truth is I've had a couple of freak events where my new SteriPen Ultra failed me. First was on the Kettle Crest trip when we had to drink from some very dark and stagnant water. Now, that water source might have clogged a filter anyway, but although it was deeply colored, it was clear. So I think the SteriPen should have worked, but it didn't. Second was my trip to the Wind River Range The SteriPen failed on the first night out with absolutely pristine water. Strangely though, it worked the next morning on the same water source and every other time on that 4-day trip. So neither of those events were really deal killers, but they did make me consider whether I shouldn't give Sawyer another try. Now, years ago, I did give the Sawyer Mini a try, and that was a pain to use. It clogged up very quickly, so it was set aside in no time at all. But the regular Sawyer Squeeze is probably the most popular filter on the market today. And if I'm truly as open-minded as I like to think I am, then it just makes sense to actually try using it myself. So I plan to do that this summer. On a different note, a good friend of mine recently had some precancerous moles removed from the tops of his ears. So that got me to thinking about being a bit more mindful of limiting my sun exposure, which prompted me to grab this hooded top, which is the Sahara hoodie from REI. Now, I'm pretty sure this isn't going to work for me because I don't think I'll like having a hood up all the time, limiting my hearing and sight. But my friends Chris and Alex both swear by theirs and claim it actually keeps them cooler on a hot sunny day than an actual short sleeve shirt. I probably look like a weirdo on the trail, but who cares in the woods, right? Obviously, it's more important to be comfortable and safe than to worry about style. And I have to admit, this shirt feels really nice and comfy, so if nothing else, it should make a really good sleeping shirt. And it was on the clearance rack at REI, so I did get a killer deal on it. As a backup, I also got a nice floppy hat from REI. This is their Sahara Guide hat, and I like it because it's super light. There's a little cinch cord in back to make it snug if you need, and this chin string that I'll probably cut off because I don't really care for those. I'm thinking anytime it's windy enough to need that, I'll just take the hat off. What I really like about this hat is that the brim is stiff enough to hold its shape, but not so stiff that it would bump against the front of the pack. That's the main reason I decided not to go with the way more expensive and more popular Tilly hats, which are much stiffer and also double the weight. Next up, I'm planning to try a radical change to my camera equipment. Inspired by Joey from my own frontier, I decided to try using the GoPro 11 to film my backpacking trips. Now this beauty is only 4.5 ounces versus nearly 2 pounds for my Sony a6600. It shoots in a whopping 5.3K video and has fantastic image stabilization for those shots of hiking down the trail, and it's weather sealed so I can finally shoot hiking in the rain without fear. Unfortunately, it doesn't have much of a zoom, so I won't be able to get those great images of wildlife unless, of course, they cooperate and parade close by me. My biggest concerns about the GoPro is battery life on a multi-day trip, storage of the images, which are more than 10 times bigger than the 1080 footage, and reliability. I borrowed a Hero 11 from my buddy Eric just to try it out, and it froze up after just 20 minutes of use. Now, it was very cold out, and I was being clumsy with thick gloves on, and I believe I just pressed too many buttons too quickly, so I'm hoping that was a freak occurrence, but we'll see. By the way, I also upgraded my laptop, so I'll finally be able to shoot and edit my videos in those higher resolutions from here on out, and I can't wait for you to see how great they look. A related purchase, I got a new tripod / selfie stick, and I think it's going to be pretty cool. I got it on Amazon, and it's from a company called Newest. The handle is a little on the large side, so we'll see how well that works. But what's really amazing about this is that it's a mini tripod that extends to 58 inches. Holy cow, look at that. The ad actually claims 62 inches, but I think that's with the phone attachment on top. It seems pretty stable too, so this will allow me to shoot from multiple heights versus being very limited with my old backpacking tripod. Also, it's got a remote and it weighs just 14 ounces. It's mostly plastic, so it might not last a really long time, but at $30, I'm okay with that, as opposed to spending the gazillions of dollars that a high-end carbon fiber tripod costs. And the actual extension rod is aluminum, so it should last a couple of seasons at least. Getting into the area of luxury items, I finally decided to try using a camp chair, at least on the hikes with friends where we head to a lake just to hang around, do some fishing, and just generally lazing around in camp. I got the FlexLite Air chair from REI because it was the cheapest I could find that would actually not collapse under my 200 pounds. And then, as if reading my mind, my buddy Chris gifted me a brand new Crazy Creek chair, so I plan to try out both of these and see which one is better on the trail. Now, these two chairs are priced about the same, and first impression is that the FlexLite is a bit more comfortable and a little lighter at 16 ounces versus 20 for the Crazy Creek, but the Crazy Creek is probably more convenient to use, so I'm thinking I'm more likely to pull it out over a long lunch break, whereas the FlexLite would probably only be used in camp, but we'll see how it works in reality, and I'll let you know on down the trail which one of those becomes my preference. The last item on my new gear list is pure luxury. This, I'm so excited about this, is an insulated growler that uses the CO2 cartridges to make the beer just like getting it on tap in a pub. It's from a company called Growler Works, and I have to say I'm really impressed with the build quality. It seems to be all metal parts and very durable, so you could take it on a hike, although at just under 3 pounds empty, I'm not likely to carry this on more than a short hike where we plan to spend more time in camp than on the trail. So why would I be so excited about this as an ultralight backpacker? Well, you may have seen in some videos that whenever possible, I like to hide a beer in the creek by the trailhead and enjoy a nicely chilled beverage as a fun treat, a way to celebrate the end of a hike. Something that you don't know is that I'm a bit of a beer snob. When regular beer is bottled, they add just a little sugar at the bottling process, which ferments and creates the carbonation that you expect in beer. But that sugar also changes the taste slightly and creates a harsh kind of carbonation. That's why serious beer drinkers always pour beer into a glass to release that carbonation so you can actually taste the beer. For years, my favorite beer has been Guinness in a can with that little nitrous bubble that makes the beer so smooth it's like drinking milk. And that's how it really tastes if you drink Guinness in an actual pub in Ireland. Well, this growler works the same way, and if I can enjoy a selection from my local microbrewery with the same smoothness of Guinness, that's going to bring a big smile to this tired hiker's face. So I'll be testing that, as well as just how cold this container will keep beer for how long. I'll be especially curious to find out whether I can keep this locked up in a hot truck for a couple of days or have to risk losing it by hiding it in a creek near the trailhead to keep it cold. I'm pretty good at hiding things, and people are generally great about not disturbing a stashed beer, but this beauty is kind of spendy, so it would be really awesome if I didn't have to risk losing it. Okay, folks, thanks for watching. Thanks especially for subscribing. I really appreciate all the new subscribers, more than I can tell you. That's it for today. See you next time. Take care.